Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this live meetup session. It's our first live meetup in one of a series that we are just starting for Hack to the Future. Hack to the Future is a global fintech hackathon that just launched. It's aimed to redefine finance for good. And for more information, please check fintech.devpost.com. Now, today, I'm really excited for this session and honored to have with us Renée Sattiewhite, who's the president and CEO of the African American Credit Union Coalition. You can also go and check AACUC.org for more information. And for this very special session, we will be focusing on credit, inequality, and the role of fintechs. Thanks a lot, Renée, for joining us today.
Shireen, thank you for the invitation. We're excited to be here.
Cool. Can you please tell us a bit more about you and about the AACUC, please?
Wow. Well, the first thing is I'm just excited to be here because I have such admiration for people who are techie. I'm not that technical, so this is exciting for me. I am the possibility of people serving other people passionately. Let me say that again. I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. That's why I work in credit union land. The AACUC was created about 23 years ago by a lot of people in Georgia who were professionals who used to go to a big conference for credit unions, the largest credit union conference in the industry. And what would happen is they would see each other, Black professionals would see each other, and they'd give each other the head nod. You know, you'd see each other and you give them the nod. But what happened was they decided that they wanted to have a seat at the table, kind of like what we're doing here with the hackathon, making sure that people of color have opportunities to get into racial equity and economic equity. And so that's a really good thing. So the AACC was created to make sure that people of color and Black people in particular had a seat at the table and a voice in the credit union movement. And so that's what's happened. At AACUC, we are so excited that we are partnering with this hackathon because AACUC is about being inclusive and making sure that everyone has an opportunity. We're talking about the commitment to change, Credit Unions Unite Against Racism. And that's an initiative that AACUC started after Mr. Floyd had been murdered. We wanted to make sure that we saw the global reaction to that and what had happened. And so AACUC didn't want to be complicit. We wanted to make sure that we were part of the conversation, that we were part of the solution. So what we see is that right now, it's a movement, not a moment, not a moment. And so that's a little bit about AACUC. A little bit about me is I'm an executive coach, mentoring trainer, and I'm also, I have a training company. And so I like to see people learn and get good information. So Christine, could you change the slide for me, please? Shireen? Next slide. Alrighty. And so today what I'm going to cover is 4 topics, a little bit more about AACUC and tell you about what financial inclusion looks like. What is that talking about? And then how can we close the wealth gap? And then what can we do for hackers to the future? What we can do, what you guys can do to make sure that we're creating products and services that are going to help the underserved. Next slide, please. Alrighty. So as I said, we'll talk about what happens with DEI and what some of our initiatives are, because we're trying to make sure that we serve all communities, but mostly how African Americans can really be moved forward in this unique role. What does that look like? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Again, as I talked about the history, we were created 23 years ago, and here we are again today, still here, ever changing, but our commitment and our mission is to increase diversity within the credit union community through advocacy and professional development. We remain still vigilant about that, making sure that that's what people are concentrating on. We're living up to our mission. We want to increase diversity within the credit union movement. We believe that credit unions can show the world how we can be better as a society, how we can eliminate systemic racism. What happens with AACUC is we are ever changing, making sure that we are providing products and services that people need that are going to move them forward. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And you can just skip that one. That's just about me. That's not, we're good there. And one of the things that we're doing today with AACUC is we're highlighting the DEI initiatives and commitment to change initiatives. And one of the things that's really great is that there's a DEI collective now. And with that collective, you'll see on that right-hand side, it's showing that these organizations have committed themselves to being part of the solution for diversity, equity, and inclusion. What does that look like? It looks like a group of practitioners who are coming together, trying to make sure that they produce products and services and give thoughtful insight on how things can be better, how we can tear down these racist walls, how can we bring up everybody and have equality and equity in all things. So that's what we're doing through these efforts. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then commitment to change. There are 4 areas that we'd like for thank you. There are 4 areas that we would like for people to understand what they can do with their credit unions or their organizations. The first area is to really look at how your organization handles diversity, equity, and inclusion. And to lead by example, to show people that you're very, very interested in making a difference in your boardroom or in your staff or in your communities, ensuring that people of color are represented. Also, what does financial inclusion look like? For the underbanked and underbanked, it's consistent with our ability to offer access to fairly priced financial services and products with individuals with lower earnings. And then closing the racial wealth gap through financial education, small business acceleration, and home ownership that serves to enhance our economic justice and individual family resilience. And then the 4th opportunity is community involvement, supporting the advancement of low-income communities of color through youth development, education, affordable housing, and workforce development. The most important thing, though, that we haven't listed is being technology savvy. How can we get our organization better? It's not just about playing the games, it's also about making sure that people know how to access things and being technology savvy. So we're excited about that. And then the next slide, please. So we talk about what has happened, the global COVID-19 health and economic crisis. Unfortunately, some statistics that are that sadden my heart. There are 50 million people who have had to file for unemployment. We have 45% of minority businesses that are projected to close permanently because of COVID. And then we've got sector disruption in travel, hospitality, restaurants, retail, commercial, real estate. All of these things, people in communities of color are suffering the greater impact. And it's said that when America catches a cold, Black people catch the flu. It's much more serious for people of color. There's always something that happens because we don't have the economic equity right now. And so when things happen that are bad for the society at large, it hits people of color even that much greater. Next slide, please. With the global justice movement reignited, things have been happening for years. There's been, systemic racism for over 400 years, and we know that it exists. But I want to say that in May, when George Floyd was murdered, we came from a different place. There were so many different things happening. So many people had been killed, and we're certainly not saying that you don't need police. We need police officers. We certainly do, but we need people who are going to make sure that they're working for all people, not just some people. And then we saw a lot of things happen, a lot of tyranny happen, and that's not good. And so we want to make sure that while we're looking at how we can solve the problems, that we're also looking at how we can be of service. How we can be of service. Next slide, please. In the credit union movement, we are people helping people. Credit unions are founded on 7 cooperative principles. We've added an 8th cooperative principle at AACUC, and that 8th cooperative principle is diversity, penned by Maurice R. Smith. He is the CEO of local government and civic federal credit unions in North Carolina. He's also the vice chair of our AACUC, and he is just a wonderful human being who really looks at how we can be inclusive. And so when you look at how credit unions were founded on different principles and the credit union model of not for profit, not for charity, but for service, and the philosophy of people helping people, we believe that we can help credit unions can help the nation in eliminating racial discrimination. We're convinced that the first order of business for AACUC that we help communities of color to become economically self-sufficient. Next slide, please. And along with the self-sufficiency, we also want to be technologically savvy. I can't state that enough. According to the Credit Union National Association, they say that credit unions rank #1 in consumer satisfaction, 21 years in a row. So there's a lot of opportunity here for credit unions to help the average citizens. We can also leverage African American institutions. For instance, there's potential for strategic alliances like the one we have today with Finestra, and then affinities that combine power for people of color and African Americans through churches, historically Black colleges, Greek organizations like the Omegas, the Alphas, the Deltas, and the AKAs, professional organizations like the 100 Black Men of America and Jack and Jill, and then community organizations and national organizations such as National Black Accountants and things of that nature. So there are ways to leverage all of this power, all this intellectual power, and we're excited about that. Next slide, please. So what is financial inclusion? Well, let's talk about that. It's the underbanked and the underbanked market, the cost of being poor and having poor credit, and a need to expand access fairly with pricing financial services. And let me just tell you about the cost of poor credit. Have I been there? Whew, I personally know about that one. Next slide, please. We have an unbanked global population, which means we have an opportunity, especially for people who are offering up solutions in the fintech area. On a global basis, we have almost 2 billion people, with half concentrated in 7 larger countries that don't have access to formal bank accounts. For instance, China has 225 million people who are unbanked. India has 190 million people who are unbanked. Pakistan, 100 million, Indonesia, 95 million, Nigeria, 68 million, Mexico, 51 million, and Bangladesh, 48 million. That's a lot of people who can use the financial services and or the technology that you produce. So I'm excited again to see what kind of things that we can come up with to make sure that people get what they need. These numbers are staggering, just staggering. Next slide, please. So why financial inclusion? What does it mean? What's the best way to deal with this? So we want to look in the areas that we can solve. So what can we solve for? We're looking at quality of life. How can we improve the quality of life for the people of color? And that's why this is a great hackathon, because we're trying to look at solving some of these issues so that people's lives can be better. It's how do you get there? Underserved, they don't have a bank account. They have restricted or no access to financial services, and they rely on a cash economy. When those are the stop gaps for you, it's really hard to have a great quality of life. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are giving people opportunities by providing technology that's going to help make them better and their quality of life purer. Next slide, please. I love this slide. The unbanked and the underbanked in the United States. Almost 1/3 of US households are unbanked or underbanked, resulting in a high annual cost for check cashing services, money orders, and wire transfers. In total, there's more than 100 million people who are underbanked consumers and small businesses small business owners in the US today. And I know that this is global, but this is a snapshot of what it looks like in the United States. So when you meet the underbanked and the unbanked, this is what happens. There's opportunity for financial services and for credit unions to really help people who are underserved, which is why credit unions were created. Banks would not lend to certain people. So credit unions, people got together and created these co-ops so that they could loan their money to one another. And it was a really great way to help the community. So oftentimes credit unions were born out of necessity. People needed to loan themselves money to have a better quality of life. Next slide, please. And we talk about the opportunities for the credit unions in the United States. And we'd like to close the gap in financial inclusion for more than those 100 million that are underbanked and unbanked. We have an emergence of fintech and mobile app platforms to increase accessibility by vulnerable and underserved populations, and the ability to sustain and revitalize minority depository institutions and CDCUs through a wide array of outsourcing resources. What that means is we have an opportunity to really help people get more information and to provide products and services that are going to revitalize these institutions that are helping in the communities. And then credit union capacity building through professional development, board training and development, and compliance workshops. So these are some of the things that we have opportunities to do to make people have a better quality of life. And then finally, securing funding for MDIs and through CDFI intermediaries, transported deposits. That means like we're getting this money in and we're going to lend to the community. So another way to look at that is when we're lending to the community, how can we get that money to them? Again, that might be a fintech, that might be a solution that one of you hackers create for us. So excited, so excited. All righty, next slide, please. We must build an inclusive economy. And I am thrilled to tell you that Raphael Bostic and Robert Kaplan, both presidents of Federal Reserves, one in Dallas and one in Atlanta, believe that agree that systematic racism in America is a drag on the economy and must be eliminated. So there's talk on the federal level of making sure that there is equity, that there's equality. And when you're looking at the Federal Reserve presidents saying they believe in this and this is where we need to go, that's a good sign for the American economy, an excellent sign for the American economy. And now we'll go to the next slide, which takes us to section 3. How can we close the racial wealth gap? Well, working families, success models, closing the wealth gap will be able to help that. We'll talk about closing the gender gap. What does that look like? And accelerating home ownership and access to business capital. And then the multidimensional aspect of systematic racism in America. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. If you can hear me, I just lost my screen. Okay, whew, it just came back. I got scared there for a minute. Whew, all righty. Living in Atlanta, Georgia is something else, I tell you. I tell you. Okay. All righty. And I am here. Okay. So closing the wealth gap, education, jobs, and investing. If you earn it, keep it, and grow it, that's a wealth building strategy. And so we're looking at how can we move people to closing that wealth gap by education and jobs and investing. And part of what happens is there's not a way that we're getting this information to people. We need to do better at that. And so you can do a lot of different things. threshold organization capacities, making sure that you're offering products and services to families, making sure that they can get those products and services. Next slide, please. Man, this one here, this one really breaks it down, doesn't it? Racial wealth inequality is rampant in the United States of America. As you can see, Caucasian people, if you look on the right-hand side where it says forecast, and by 2024, we're looking at people who are not of color having $122,366 median for the year, as opposed to their wealth. That's their wealth. The inequality is just rampant. Latinos have $1,600 in wealth, and Black people will have $1,200 in wealth. So there's such a large gap there. That's something that we can solve for when we're doing this hackathon. How can we bridge that gap? How can we close that up? And so I have a really good friend who always says, the facts don't lie. So it's important that we take a look at how can we do things a little differently and better. Next slide, please. There are some that are concerned that African American wealth may fall to zero by 2053 if we don't take heed and do some things differently. If we don't look at how we can attract better financial services, if we can do better as far as investing, if we can change our habits, and if we can have more access. What does that look like? So unfortunately, here are some staggering statistics that are just grim for African American women. Single Black women with a bachelor's degree ages 20 to 39 have a median net worth of minus 11,000 to zero, while white women have a net worth range of 3,400 to 7,500. Married Black women with a bachelor's degree ages 20 to 39 have a median net worth of minus 20,000 to 7,000, while white women have a net worth range of 18,000 to 97,000. A single Black woman with a bachelor's degree over 60 has a median net worth of 11,000, while white women have a net worth of $384,000. That's a big, big difference. And then married Black women with a bachelor's degree over 60 have a median net worth of $424,000, while white women have a net worth of $778,000. Now, when you look at that, that says volumes again in how we have work to do to get back to equity and equality. Next slide, please. And then again, more grim information. A single Black woman in her economic prime, ages 36 to 49, has a median net worth of $5 in comparison to the median net worth of a white woman the same age was $42,000. A Black woman with children has a median net worth of zero. So it's really important that we look at these statistics and see how we can solve for them. The poverty rate for African American women is 28.6%, which is over double the poverty rate of white women at 10.8%. So we know that things need to be changed, and we know that things, here are some of the areas that we can do that in. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So accelerating home ownership. So there's an opportunity for us as Americans and the fintech area and hackers in general. Can you create something that's going to help accelerate home ownership? What can a product or service look like? What can technology do to help embrace this? And perhaps it's, different types of ideas, but what can you do that can create something that can help people get to home ownership quicker? Well, certainly in savings products, certainly in teaching people how to budget, to save, to get that home. Those are important aspects of how to get that done. Well, what does it look like on the technology side? How can you as a hacker create something that's going to help accelerate home ownership? Let's keep that in mind as we're going through the rest of the slides. Next slide, please. So access to capital for Black-owned businesses, what does that look like? There was a report that came out in 2010, about 10 years ago. Minority firms are more likely to be denied loans. Well, this last round of PPP loans, we saw for the United States, we saw that that came with a lot of some baggage. Oftentimes, people of color or minority-owned businesses aren't set up as well as our counterparts. And because we don't have access to certain information and certain opportunities, we're lacking. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes minority firms don't apply for grants or loans because they're afraid of being denied. Oftentimes people are rejected or fear reject because they're not, the playing field is not level and the opportunities are not there, along with the opportunities and the criteria. So if the criteria is different for some and not the same across the board, you're marginalizing people. And so that's what happens. You need to make sure that everybody has the same access to capital. Next slide, please. One of the things that we're looking at doing at AACUC is partnering with organizations that are trying to help young people when their children learn how to invest. We believe that if we start early enough, people will understand that you can grow your money, you can have wealth. How can you do that? Well, we'll be teaching youth and college students to begin investing just $100 or $200 per month. And at a certain period of time, as you can see on the grid, you can get to $1 million with that compound interest. So over a long period of time, the compounded value of dividends and growth, we can create a $1 million portfolio. So those are some of the things that we'd like to see happen for people of color so that we can understand and maximize our opportunities. Next slide, please. One of the things that I love talking about is, I remember telling a young woman years ago that if someone had told me this, I wouldn't have to work now when I was her age. And that was to just save $10 a week. If you save $10 a week when you're much younger and you're putting in a savings account and then it's compounding interest, there's money that you can get. So community bankers say that children who open up a college savings account or their parents who open up that college savings account are 6 times more likely to graduate from college. The baby bonds. It's very, very important if you have children, if you can start early. The earlier you start investing, and savings is an investment, the earlier you start, the better it's going to be for your children when they become old or adults. Okay. Next slide, please. Systematic racism reaches beyond economic matters. It's important that we understand that just systematic racism just doesn't impact the people of color. It impacts every sector of business, housing, banking, criminal justice, public health, education. All of these play a factor in what happens when there's systematic racism. All those things keep just etching away. But all of these other areas are affected. And so it's important for us to look at how can we solve again? How can we solve with the technology? How can we address these things? What can we do? So we're looking at how the years of oppression can be opened up. And I truly believe that technology is the answer. How can we get on equal footing? Next slide, please. So the cost of being Black in America. Sean Rochester speaks about that in The Black Tax. And I was really pleased when I read that book because it provides such great information about statistics and how and the why of it. And so there's also The Hidden Cost of Being African American. That's a very unique and good book as well. It talks about what are the things that we don't understand? How, after 400 years, are we at this place? It looks like, oh, well, you've got a whole lot of people who are doing well, and Sean's dressed up in a suit, and he looks like he's handling business, which he is. But there's so many people of color who don't have the same access, who were not able to go to college, and those who have gone to college, who are working minimum wage jobs because there's just no work. So it's important that we look at what's the cost of being Black in America for to see how we can solve to make things better. Next slide, please. And then this is just thinking about why we do what we do. The social unrest sometimes can be overwhelming. All the people who've had to die to get us where we are today. And what I mean by that is all these needless, these sufferings, these people, this police brutality, the things that have gotten us to where we are, where we're at social unrest, where we're looking at how can we solve for this. It's very important that we don't forget about Black Lives Matter. I know people say all lives matter, and yes, I believe that too. Remember, I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. Certainly all lives matter. But if we do not solve for making sure that everyone is equal and has a level playing field, it's never going to end. So I'm encouraged by the fact that this hackathon may produce something so extraordinary that we eliminate racial discrimination, that we bring everybody up, and that we have economic justice. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Color of the Law, a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. There's lots of books that you can educate yourself on that will tell you things about redlining and how that causes a wealth gap and segregation. There are lots of things that have happened throughout United States history about how systemic racism occurred. When the Civil War was over, there were lots of things that happened that all citizens were supposed to receive. Well, there's different, the Constitution has amendments, and one of those amendments, it just didn't work out right. So there are laws that were created to intentionally hold people back. That's part of that systemic racism. And those are things that need to be uncovered and also shed a light on so that people understand what we're working with. How can we overcome that? Next slide, please. So we talk about the new Jim Crow. So back in the day, Jim Crow was created to stack the legal system against Black people. Well, it's now the new Jim Crow is that people are being incarcerated, and that's stacking the deck. Again, more legal trouble, legal issues. People of color are disproportionately incarcerated because of different things. And the social unrest continues to look at those things. People are saying, it's not fair. We need to make things fair. How can we do that? And so we have to look at the laws as well, and when those laws were created, and what do we need to do to change them or overturn them? Next slide, please. Now, what you've been waiting for. Hack to the future. Needs analysis. Let's take a look at that, our countermeasures, and our possible developer focus areas. Next slide, please. All righty. So one of the things that a theme could be is hacking for systemic inequalities. What does that look like? So the problem is this. Racial income disparities, wealth disparities continue to expand in the United States and other countries as well. Upward mobility in the United States is decreasing and not increasing. Root causes are systemic discrimination, including redlining and other social and economic practices that are compounded over multiple generations, creating ever-increasing disparities in wealth. African Americans have not had equal access to capital for home ownership or small business development, And our major institutions are now beginning to address demands for social and economic justice, only now. So the downward trend is that information-based economy with the digital divide creates additional hurdles and inequalities, and many face unstable income sources in the new gig economy. Next slide, please. So what can we do about that? So here are some of the suggestions that I have. Learn and earn. Higher education and workforce development creates higher wages. Save and invest. Build a culture of savings versus consuming, investing in real estate and other things. Asset building is essential. Home ownership and small business acceleration. Eliminate systemic bias in credit rating systems, eliminating implicit and explicit bias factors. Expanded access to capital. We need more access to fintech platforms for microfinance. And social impact investing. Opportunities for institutions and individuals to support a better world. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we can look at, categories for developers to address will be the following. The intersection of employer payroll platforms and access to fairly priced financial services for low-income and hourly workers, including small overdraft loans, which serve as a safety net for some. Removing implicit explicit bias from a credit rating algorithm and the overall application process. And then creating greater access to small dollar lending platforms. Credit unions do a good job of that, and so do CDFIs. But there will be really even more opportunity for someone to come up with different ways to do that, maybe accessing through a cell phone or that type of technology. Crowdfunding platforms that efficiently connect communities of giving based upon specific causes, special interests, and neighborhoods, along with integrating social media type features with investing clubs, style platforms for new investors, or expanding opportunities for access to alternative investments, real estate, and other things, and connecting investors to social impact investments for affordable housing and job creation. So those are some of the things in theme one that you can do. And we can come back to slide 35 during our Q&A. Next slide, please. Theme two for our hackers is embracing tech-enabled change. The problem, oh goodness, technology-induced displacement in the economy will destroy at least 15 jobs for every new job that is created by robotics, AI, and other forms of automation. Countermeasures could be AI for humans, machine learning for good, ethical fintech products and services, and transparency and accountability. Next slide, please. So categories for developers could be mobile-first platforms and multilingual solutions designed for the unbanked and underbanked, using AI and behavior change research to create faster adoption of desired behaviors in finance, education, healthcare that will improve outcomes for the vulnerable populations. And this one is very, very critical. When you're in a vulnerable population, if we can find solutions for these this population, that can only help the world. Natural language processing integrated into financial products, business software such as QuickBooks that serve to remove barriers of accessibility. Integrating payment platforms such as Square or PayPal with business software such as QuickBooks to create seamless interoperable, I can't even say that word, right? That's seamless operations and on-demand reporting, even tax filings. So we're looking at, so can you marry these things that make it easier for people? Can you solve for that? What does that look like? What does that look like? Next slide, please. And then the last theme that I have for you all is hacking through COVID-19. So the problem is the sharp economic downturn due to COVID disruption in the economy, women leaving the workforce to take care of childcare, to take care of their children, uneven school openings. Those kinds of things have been paramount to people. They're just suffering. Implications for essential workers, frontline hourly employees that cannot work from home. There's a whole population of people who don't have access to computers, who don't have laptops in their home, who don't have the wireless internet that they need from their home to do their jobs, if they were able to do them that way. African American and Latinx women and their children will bear the brunt of looming eviction crisis in America. 30% of households did not pay their July rent or mortgage in full. More middle class layoffs are coming as airlines and retailers continue to downsize. And as we're coming up on the winter for the United States, the flu season is really rampant all the time. I can only imagine that COVID is going to make it that much worse. And then some of the countermeasures, government and non-governmental safety nets, community-based and person-to-person solutions, shared housing options, new work options such as job sharing, and pandemic pods for homeschooling and new childcare options. So people will always figure out how they can make things work. Next slide, please. We are resilient. People are resilient. Human beings all bleed red. And so it's important that we work together trying to solve, again, how can we address some of the systemic problems that we keep seeing, that we keep having. So suggested categories for developers would be streamlining access to social services and relief funds, rental payments, etc. Sources of financial support for essential workers, childcare funds, neighbor-to-neighbor resources pools that made available through a monitor platform to prevent fraud or abuse, tech platforms for alternate safety net structures for the working poor and the middle class that are based upon private funding sources, forgivable loans or deferred payment plans. Those are all some of the things that you can do as a hacker. Produce something that's going to make sure that people are served. How can you serve? How can you solve a problem? Solving the problem to serve. And so again, so many opportunities. And that's all the information that I have. I'm ready to take questions if you like. Shireen? Shireen, I can't hear anything you're saying.
Thank you. I was on mute. So yeah, I was actually just saying thank you for this very insightful presentation. You took us through the challenges that come with inequalities, as well as the opportunity of that comes with the unbanked and the underbanked, and all these great ideas that you've shared with us and with all the hackers on the three different themes. So thank you. Thanks a lot for this. Now it's time for questions. So let's take the first question from our audience. The first question is actually about Black fintech founders. How can Black fintech founders benefit, in your opinion, from partnering with credit unions who serve communities of color? And what should be their main points when bringing tech equity opportunities to credit unions?
I always say you need to solve for the problem. So when you're looking at approaching a credit union, if you're a Black fintech owner and you're looking at approaching a credit union, you want to say, this is the needs analysis is, we have figured out a way to help your membership in this manner. So what does that look like? So for instance, it could be, and I'm not that good at this kind of stuff, but it could be anything around helping members. Perhaps it's helping members to save money, and every time they go to the grocery store, sometimes they ask you, do you want to deposit this to help the Miracle Fund? Do you want to help this fund? What if that money, if they use their debit card, that money goes to their savings? They up their, every time they make a purchase, they go 30 cents over, or they say a set amount. So when a fintech owner approaches a credit union, they need to solve for a problem. So you want to be in a position where you're saying, I can help you do this. I can help you reach your members. I know that there are companies that do different types of loan products. that have helped credit unions to say, we can help your loan processing quicker. We can help you do it this way. So you always want to have how can the credit union benefit? I love to say I don't want to do anything unless it's win-win-win.
Thank you. That's very clear. Also, as we're talking about fintech founders and reaching out to credit unions, I just wanted to mention that as part of the hackathon, Hack to the Future, Renée and the African American Credit Union Coalition are also supporting the hackers with 3 prizes. So actually, the top 3 teams will get support from the AACUC, helping them introduce their projects to credit unions, and also helping them bring them to productization and be market ready. So thanks a lot again, Renée, again for your support there.
Win-win.
Absolutely. Another question that we've got is about your view on the use of alternative data, for example, social media, when it comes to solutions like credit scoring.
So I have a number 2 who was phenomenal. Her name is Michelle Outlaw, and Michelle is a loan guru. Anything loans, consumer, business, real estate. She is awesome. And I think she cringes because AACUC is getting ready to come up with a credit card that is based on different criteria. So I'm all for it. I was introduced to that concept through being a judge for CUNA Mutual Group's, one of our best partners, CUNA Mutual Group's Focus competition. And what they did was they go around to these different colleges, a lot of historically Black colleges, and they had competitions, just like this one here, had competitions on who can set up a credit union and what does it look like in the future. And one of the young men, I want to say AJ Lothrop, he did a great job in showing us how that the algorithms should be changed to the social media stuff. And when you're looking at younger people who don't have a credit history, why not use that? Now, I told you, Michelle might cringe on me because she's thinking in her head, where's the risk? The risk is too great. That's not how we do it. Well, again, this is the opportunity to do something different. How can it be relevant? How can you make sure that you're still being responsible financially, but looking at different factors that will make people be a better loan risk? And so, yes, I'm all for it. I think it has to be tested and tried, but I do believe that we should include some of those social media metrics because we're not the same society we used to be.
Yeah, thank you. That's very exciting. Renée, I have another question for you, which is more on the trends that you see today in the market and as you're working closely with credit unions. So you mentioned the impact of COVID, which is obviously not very positive, unfortunately. I wanted to ask you about how do you see the trend when it comes to fintech innovations and the way they are being adopted by credit unions today?
So credit unions aren't adopting as quickly as we'd like. Part of that is because I am part of the baby boomers group officially. I may look pretty, but I'm old. And so there are a lot of baby boomers sitting in the president CEO seats. I believe as we have more younger people come up, that these things will be different. However, right now, there's a large group of people who are governing credit unions who may not have the, I need to be careful on how I say this. So I think that right now, people aren't as comfortable with fintech because it's not a staple. I think that there are some progressive credit unions, and those credit unions are really leading the way in making sure that they're doing everything they can for their members. I think that our association with Finestra is going to do a lot for credit unions to see that there are people who can do this well, and make sure that people are taken care of. Again, you have to remember that credit unions are looking at making sure that they take care of all of their members. And so being conservative is probably what credit unions do best. They're more conservative in terms of lending, but they embrace people more with how they lend. And so I think that credit unions are perfect for fintech because they offer solutions that credit unions can use for their members.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, if a fintech is solving for a problem, then obviously the adoption would be easier and quicker. We've got a new question from the audience from Lori, actually, saying that many mortgage companies require a credit score of a minimum of 660 or 640 to refinance. Do credit unions have the same threshold?
I wish I could tell you that I know. I don't know the answer to that question. So I'm going to say this. When I bought my home, I had a really low credit score. That was over 25 years ago. But when I bought my home, I had to pay an exorbitant amount of interest. I had an adjustable interest rate. So I know, again, when I was going through the slides, I know about that poor credit history. I know about that. And so, but what credit unions will do is credit unions will help you build up your credit. I have good credit now because I have been at credit unions, because my credit union people poured into me. They helped me establish a budget. They gave me the loan for my car. And so it's important to establish something with your credit unions. Credit unions are wonderful. And yes, I do have a bank account, but I also have credit union accounts. And my credit unions accounts, those are the ones, the credit union people are the ones who have helped me to really be a better steward over my money and to show me where I could do better. So I can't answer that question about what the threshold is for the credit score for a mortgage, but what I can tell you is that credit unions do mortgages and that they work with their members. So if you're a member of a credit union, you're more likely to get financed because you have a relationship.
Yeah, thank you. We've got another question from Lori about, I guess, supporting and helping their clients build their credit history. Will credit unions offer that without charging specific fees for it?
So yes, they will. Credit unions do not charge. It's called financial literacy. Credit unions do not charge helping people to build their credit. They want to make sure that people have access to financial products and services that will help them have a better life and a better quality of life. So for instance, there's home ownership classes that you can take at a credit union, at a certified credit union that helps you with the down payment for your home loan, for your next home. Also, there are products and services at credit unions, such as secured credit cards, so that you can help build up your credit. There's so many different opportunities that credit unions will help you with, and they'll walk you through it because that's what credit unions do. Credit unions are helping people. They want to see you succeed.
Yeah, thank you. And you've touched actually on a very important point, which is the financial literacy, which is something as important as inclusion, or goes hand in hand with inclusion. So yeah, I think, and that's, by the way, one of the topics of the hackathon themes as well. One other question I have for you, Renée, is about the hackathon specifically, and probably the last question we'll take today if we don't have any more from the audience. What would you love to see as a project come out of the hackathon? What would be the innovation you definitely want to see there?
Shireen, you didn't tell me you're going to ask me that question. That's a good question, though. Wow. I would love to see services that come out that can make it easy for the 80-year-old who is still vibrant, who wants to bank, who wants to know how to do their banking. I would love to see an accelerated budgeting process for children, so that they could see what that looks like. If they have this amount of money, and if they put in 25 cents a day, where's that going to take them when they're 35? I would love to see how we can do the social media where it helps with the loan, making sure that the algorithms look different. I would love to see how small business owners can have a better way to do their banking, have a better way to process payments, and to keep better records. The most important thing I would love to see, Shireen, so you got me going. The most important thing I'd love to see is a marriage between bookkeeping and tax. So making sure that the small business owner has something that takes care of their tax stuff, that chronicles their stuff, so that when it's time to take it to their CPA, and please use a CPA to do your taxes, when it comes time to do your taxes, you have all that information on the ready, and you don't have to go searching and searching for it. I would love to see stuff like that automated.
Wow, thank you. That's very inspiring. Thanks a lot, Renée. We don't have any more questions, so I'd like to say a big thank you again for both the presentation and this very insightful, very inspiring discussion that we've just had, going through all the questions from the audience. There's definitely lots to do, lots of effort to be done to drive more equality, inclusion, financial literacy, and fintech can definitely play a key role there. So I'd like to invite all our audience to go and check the hackathon website, fintech.devpost.com, and to take part and to solve for these challenges and to help us redefine finance. I'd like also to mention our next session, our next live meetup, which is taking place tomorrow, 2 p.m. UK time. And this time we'll focus on the technology perspective to all of these challenges and how to remove bias from technology. We'll be covering this topic with Camille Morvan, who's a PhD in neuroscience. She's a former researcher and professor at New York University and Harvard University. And she's also the founder and CEO of Goshaba, a startup focused on removing bias from recruiting in the recruiting process. So please join us tomorrow for this upcoming discussion. Renée, thank you so much again. I really loved the session. I'm sure all of our audience enjoyed your presentation and the discussion. And we're looking forward to seeing you on the judging panel for the hackathon. And hopefully we'll see all of the great ideas that you mentioned come to reality with the hackathon.
Awesome. Awesome. Shireen, thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.